Okay, class. This is our Bible class. We need to know the date.
It's the 11th of March.
And it's Wednesday evening.
Yes.
And this is Maisie with the new hairdo. And Rebecca, the older sister. Right, we're going to carry on our study. It's our fourth study in the book of Matthew. Now remember, we started off this studies by saying that I believed it's important we have a full understanding of Matthew because it's the first gospel that was written. And Matthew was an apostle sent by Jesus and commissioned to go into all the world and preach the gospel. Therefore, all that Matthew wrote would be according to what he believed he was taught to teach. So we've gone through the first chapter, which deals with the birth of Jesus, how that he came from, what was the great-grandfather of Jesus? What's the name of the great-grandfather?
So, Abraham.
Abraham, right, okay. That's what Matthew refers to. And what was the next person in line, a great person in Matthew's line of descent of Jesus?
King David.
King David, yes. Got it. Right, so right the way down to Joseph. Was Joseph the father of Jesus?
Not biologically.
But he was legally. Now, what happened? The wise men came from the east. Why did they come from the east? What had prompted them to come?
Star.
A star. They'd seen his star in the east, right? And they'd learned from Scripture, and the information had been passed down from the prophets that the star would rise, and when they saw the star, they were moved to go and see Jesus. They went to which city did they come to find Jesus?
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. Okay. Right. How did Jerusalem and how did the king of Jerusalem respond to this visit from these wise men? Macy.
Wasn't he like
Troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And was Herod pleased that the king was going to be born in this city? What do you think?
I think so.
Oh, I don't think so either. Right. So what did he do? He called the wise men, or he called the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees together, and said, "Look, where does the Scripture say Jesus, the Messiah, is to be born?" And they said, "What town?"
Bethlehem.
Bethlehem. Right, so what did Herod do? He said to the wise men, "Go to Bethlehem and find the young child and give me word also that I may too go and worship him." So that's what he did. He sent them to. So they came to Bethlehem, the star reappeared, and there was a star above the house where Joseph and Mary was. They saw the young child, and what did it say? What did they do when they saw the young child and his mother? These three wise men.
They gave him 3 frankincense, gold.
Right, which was quite a lot of money, really. Yeah, really quite a lot of stuff. We'll see if that became useful in a moment. And they worshipped him, and immediately the wise men had left. What happened?
Your turn.
Did the wise men go back to Jerusalem and tell King Herod? You don't know? What do you think, mate?
An angel appeared in a dream. Not a dream, an angel
An angel appeared and
told them not to go back, so they fled.
To go back another way. Okay, that's fine. So that was what was said. Now, Joseph was then told in a dream to do something. Do you know what it was?
Hide Mary? Hide the baby and Mary?
Flee
Yeah.
to Egypt. Right? I was going to show you a map on the thing on the wall where Egypt was, with reference to where Bethlehem was. So if Bethlehem's there, Egypt was down there. They'd fled there. And therefore they stayed there quite some time. Until... What happened how long did they stay there for?
Till Herod died?
Till Herod died. Right, that's the point. So from that we learn it's quite reasonable to flee if there's a problem. Now you're talking earlier about something about fleeing. You know, in the New Testament it talks about in those days,
Yeah.
flee. It says flee. They fled to a place called Petra. It's quite reasonable, practical to flee if there's a problem. Okay? Now, the thing is this. They had money, Joseph and Mary, because look at the frankincense, gold and myrrh they had. That kept them in business there while they were there. So that was a provision of God. So they were there until Herod died. I think we mentioned Herod's death last time.
Yeah, do you remember what it was?
Do you remember what he died of? Very soon afterwards.
Eating worms.
Worms. He got edema. He got all kinds of stuff. He stank. And Josephus writes about this death. It was an awful death. And I was reading also another comment about the fact that this was a known fact. Matthew doesn't record his death. Just says he died.
Oh.
He doesn't say what he died of. He doesn't say how bad his death was. So that's a bit of modesty. He didn't need to bring attention to it. Let the world deal with their dead. Let the dead bury the dead. And therefore Matthew simply says that he died. So the angel then came to Joseph, to go back. Now, we're going to come on to this point here. Let's read the section which is appropriate. Matthew chapter, Bexy, Macy, open up. Chapter 2 verse 12. Bexy, you can start.
And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord
Appeareth.
to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother and flee into Egypt. And be thou there until I bring thee word of Herod will seek the young child to destroy him.
Yeah. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son.
Then
Yeah, carry on, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Yeah,
Okay.
carry on.
Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and in all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. That's awful.
Then was fulfilled that which was spoken of by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, In Ramah there was a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted because they are not. Right, so the first scripture that is referred to, it says, that it might be fulfilled, out of Egypt have I called my son. Now that reference is a reference in scripture which we're going to look at, and it might seem strange when we look at it because it doesn't perhaps seem quite clear. It's Hosea chapter 11 verse 1. Right, Macy, you know how to find it? So the reference Matthew is quoting is this verse, and that's we've got to understand what it means. Chapter 11 verse 1.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Rebecca, you can read it.
When Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt.
Right. That's the quotation. But if we look further into that chapter, we might question, what has that got to do with the birth of Jesus? For instance, look at the next verse. As they called them, so they went from them. They sacrificed to Balaam and burned incense to graven images. But what has that got to do with the scripture which says, out of Egypt I will call my son? So that's what I'm going to answer the question. Right, first of all, Israel. I know we haven't studied the Old Testament yet, but we need to do all that really. But let's see if what you already know. Who is Israel? Any idea, Becca?
It's a country, not.
It's a country.
Yeah.
Right, it is a country, but it's called Israel because it is the land of Israel belonged to.
Oh.
Right? So we'll need to look into that later. But let's
right,
brief
okay.
rundown is this. Abraham was promised his seed, the children, that he would have a child, and the children would be so numerous, if you can count the stars on the seashore, in heavens, or the sand on the seashore, that's the number of the children. Now, Abraham's son that was born to him was a miraculous birth.
Because
Similar.
his wife wasn't meant to be able to have kids.
She was 80 years
yeah.
old.
Yeah.
She was 80 years old, she was barren. Meanwhile, Abraham had done his own thing, or according to his wife, and married, took a woman, a concubine as they call, and had another child called
Was that Hagar, the woman?
Hagar, yeah. And the son. So there was another son, but the child of promise was in fact Isaac, right? Isaac married another girl. What was her name? Rebecca. Okay. So Abraham, Isaac, and then they gave birth to a child, twins, right? What were the twins called?
Do you remember this?
Rebecca's child, twins.
Jacob and Esau.
Jacob and Esau, right. Now, Esau was a man's man, and Jacob was a bit of a manipulator, was a problem. And the thing was, Jacob managed to get the birthright from his older brother, and cause friction. But the point was, Jacob had children, right? How many children did he have?
Can't remember.
Quite a number, more than me. I've only got 6, right? Jacob, only 6, right? Right, Jacob had 12. Right, different wives. Katrina, which one I think her name was, who was his Rachel and another. So now those 12 people go by the names of Dan, all the 12 tribes of Israel. There was Reuben, Simeon, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and the children of Joseph were Ephraim, Manasseh, and there was Benjamin, Dan, Asher, Gad, Naphtali. Joseph had already gone down into Egypt and became the prime minister. And during the famine, all the 12 children and their children came in to live in Egypt as a family. The whole of Israel, because Jacob's name was called Israel because he wrestled with God in prayer one night, and his thigh was wounded, and he was then called by God, called his name Israel. So Israel is the name of Jacob. Jacob has 12 tribes.
Oh.
So when we talk about Israel, we're talking about the 12 tribes of Jacob.
Okay.
Israel, the whole body, went down into Egypt, into slavery. And we ought to watch that film one day, and I'll try to get Nancy to watch it, the Ten Commandments. Right? Have you seen it?
No.
Oh, you want to watch it? Yeah, well, it was 2 hours long, 3 hours long. Right, so what happened is the Lord sent Moses to deliver the whole of Israel and all the children out of Egypt. They were in Egypt for 400 years, I think it was.
To deliver from slavery.
From slavery, okay? So God was calling Israel out of Egypt. Right, that's the first call.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And then, so when it comes to...
Why are they going to slave? So they just migrate. Why did everyone migrate there? I know why Jesus was...
There was a famine. Great famine in the land. of Egypt during those days, and they went down to Egypt because Joseph had stored up grain for 7 years.
Oh yeah. I
Joseph
remember.
provided
Oh.
for the whole region.
Oh,
Right, that's
yeah.
what happened there. So Israel was in bondage, and God, the Lord, brought them out of the Egyptian bondage. In that story, Egypt, in the story in Egypt, the Pharaoh actually killed the firstborn, thinking they'd get rid of Moses. Same as what happened to Jesus, right? So they were brought out of Egypt, and so in that sense the scripture says, out of Israel have I brought my son. But that was a collective bringing out of Egypt. But now Hosea says, when Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. So that is a reference to that being called out of Egypt.
Okay.
But let's come down to this, right? There's a greater than Moses here, because Jesus, the Son of God, the literal Son of God, who was the eternal Son, became truly human, was truly human, truly the Son of God, went down into Egypt, and out of Egypt have I called my son. So the scripture is fulfilled in twofold ways. So it's bringing attention to the fact that God brings people out of Egypt. The other thing about that is this: every one of us, left to ourselves, are in Egypt, a world like Egypt. We're under rulers that we don't like necessarily, satanic influences, the ways of the world, our world. We're not in God's kingdom in that sense. We're in a dark kingdom, right? Now we're all like that, but Jesus is bringing out of this darkness a people from out of Egyptian bondage, from out of this world's bondage, into God's marvellous light. That's the call and work of the gospel, and Jesus is doing it. That's what we're going to learn about. They were delivered out of Egypt. Okay, the last one is,
18.
yeah, what was it saying about it?
In Ramah was there a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning. Rachel weeping for her children and would not be comforted because they are not. I don't understand that.
Right, okay, well look, Rachel was the mother of, must have been Jacob, mustn't it, surely?
Right, okay, yeah.
Right?
Okay,
There.
yeah.
So now we've talked about Israel as the body of people. Now we're talking about Rachel as a mother of the children.
Okay.
Right, so
yeah.
Rachel, right, then it says her children, right? There was heard a voice of lamentation. Lamentations is crying and wailing, distress. Oh dear, right. Why? Because Herod had killed the children under 2 years old, the whole throughout the land. What an evil, wicked creature, okay? And weeping with great mourning, right? Rachel weeping for her children and would not be comforted, because they were not. They were dead. She can't be comforted once you've lost a child. So that's what it's saying. That prophecy was a fulfilment of that time, and I it's quite amazing to me that all things that happen to us are ordered by God, the good and the bad. God is not responsible for the evil. He holds men responsible. He brings them to account for it. He holds us responsible for what we do and say, but we can often be delivered from circumstances, like I have been in many situations. Like we were talking earlier about my finances, I've been helped providentially, but God helped us. So we've got every reason to trust in God, what God provides for them that believe. And Herod, he got his comeuppance.
And he's saying, arise, take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they are dead which sought the young child's life. And he arose and took the young child and his mother and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father Herod, he was afraid to go thither. Notwithstanding, being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene.
He was instructed whilst in Egypt to return to Israel. And he told him, it's okay, Herod's dead. But when he got to Israel, Joseph was concerned because of the son was still alive. So no doubt he prayed, no doubt he asked God for direction. So the angel appeared to him and said, right, now go down to live in Nazareth. That's where they used to live. It's a mean city, it's like living in the Stowe Estate.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, some people think that's why Jesus was called a Nazarene, a bad term, oh, he's a Nazarene, Yeah. However, there we are. So that's a fulfillment. And I can't find any reference in the Old Testament as to where that prophecy is, except that Nazareth was viewed upon by the people as not a very nice place to live. So that's it for this year. Okay?
This year.
Questions? I think we're going to have a question night. A
I
set
think
of
you need
questions.
to do a quiz.
A quiz and rewards.
Yeah, there's a reward.
What's
Yeah.
the reward?
Get the right answers.
Well,
But let's not call it a quiz, we'll call it an examination. Let's be more severe. We will have an examination
yeah,
and we will send it all to our viewers,
yeah.
and we want you all to respond, and the person that gets the highest marks will be rewarded publicly with congratulations, and we'll give you all the praise, due praise for all the right answers. So let's have a response, please, if you think that's a good idea.